first of all, let's look at the word percent. Let's say, well, okay. So percent, it's per cent. Like, how many dogs can I get per dollar, right? Let's say, for example, dogs cost a quarter. Then you might say, okay, I can get 4 dogs per dollar, right? So that's what the per means. Then there's cent, which is actually being pronounced wrong because it's a French word. It's cent. Cent means 100 in French. So cent or cent, and then per 100. Okay? So when you're asking about a percent, you're talking about how many of that thing there is per 100. So I'll give you an example. Imagine that you have a population of people living inside this apartment building, and there's 100 people in there, right? So 100 people in total live inside this apartment building. And one person here who's living on the top floor is sick. Okay. You could say here that one person per 100 is sick. Or in other words, 1% of people in this apartments are sick. So that's the basic idea of percents. Okay, let's look at another example. Let's imagine that we have a gymnasium that looks kind of like this, and we have 300 people in there in total. So there's people just standing around talking like this, all over the place. And we say that there's 3 people in here inside this group of 300 that are sick. So 3 are sick. What percentage of people are sick here? Well, we know that there's 300 people in total, and we know that 3 are sick. So to figure out how many people per 100 are sick, what we can do is we can evenly divide this group of people. So we'll take this 300 people and we'll divide them into 3 parts, like this. Okay? And each part will have 100. Now I said they're going to be evenly divided. What that means is that these 3 sick people are going to be evenly divided into each group. So there's 1 sick person in each group, like that. Okay? So per 100 people, there's 1 person that's sick, right? So we'd say 1 person per 100 is sick, which also means 1% of the people in the gymnasium is sick. You might be wondering, is it 1% of people here that are sick, or is it 1% of people that are here that are sick? It's actually the exact same thing. Let's kind of show you what I mean. So these people in the gymnasium, we're gonna, instead of breaking them up into 3 groups, like over there, what we're gonna do is just ask them to move over into 3 separate groups, like in here, inside the gymnasium. So I'm gonna grab these guys, move them here, and so we have 3 groups, right? Like this. And if we take these 3 sick people and evenly divide them into each one of these groups, like that. So these are the sick people right here. And we see that the pattern still holds. It's still 1 per 100 people that are sick in each one of these groups. So in total, we can say for this whole thing that 1 person per 100 is sick, or 1% are sick. Let's do another example, something a little bit harder. So we're going to get harder and harder as we move on. Let's imagine that we have one person inside this gymnasium who is sick. So this person is sick. Their face is all flushed, and there's a bunch of other people in here. And in total, there's 200 people inside this gymnasium. Now, or sorry, not how many, but what's the percentage of people that are sick? Well, we can do the same thing that we did last time. We can divide all these people right in half. And remember, you need to evenly divide the sick person. And since there's only one, you have to cut them in half. So you have two groups of people. Each group contains 100 people in total. And half of a sick person. So just to be clear, that means that we have half of a sick person, and we have 99.5 just healthy people. So in total, the group contains 100 people, right? So we have 100 people and half of a sick person. And so what we can say is that for every 100 people, there is going to be 0.5 sick people. And to be just a little bit more clear, because this can be kind of confusing, what I mean is every group of 100 people, right, 100 people will have half of a person that's sick. And that's a little bit confusing. Maybe it's a little bit easier to imagine if it's just one person. So if you have 100 people in this group, right? So there's 100. Let's imagine that I drew 100 boxes here. One of those people is going to be sick, right? It's not that like there's 100 people and then there's half of a sick person, or 100 people and then there's one person who's sick. It's not like that. It's, you have your 100 people like this, and one of them is going to be sick. So this group has 100 people. But in this case, we have 0.5. So for every 100 people there's going to be 0.5 sick people in a group. So 0.5% of population, didn't spell that right, is going to be sick. Okay, let's try another example. So let's imagine this time that our gymnasium has 50 people inside of it, and one person in here is sick. Okay. So if one person per 50 is sick, so it's 1 over 50 are sick, so it's 1 per 50 are sick, right? But we want to know how many per 100 are sick, right? What we can do is we can take this gymnasium and multiply it by 2, like that. So now we have one sick person in each gymnasium, and then we're going to remove the barrier between them so they all become one big group that has 100 people. Of that 100, 2 are sick. Okay? So 2 are sick. So if 1 per 50 are sick, then it must be 2 per 100 that are sick. Right? That just makes sense. Now, at this point, you might have noticed something. Why do I keep drawing this thing here? Well, the reason why is because it's going to help us solve percent questions a little bit easier. When you multiply the total number of people. Like, let's say you multiply this by 2, right? So this thing represents the group. So there's 50 people in the group, and of that 50, one is sick. You want to multiply the whole group by 2 so you can get per 100. What you do is you got to multiply the top and bottom by 2. So let's do that. So we'll multiply the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. So 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. 50 multiplied by 2 is 100. And that gives us a nice clean way to show that 2 people per 100 are sick. Or 2%, 2 per 100, percent, which means 100 in French, are sick. Finally, we're coming to the hardest problem that you could solve for percentages. Let's say, for example, that you have 351 people in this group, and 5 of them are sick. Okay, so what would that be per 100 or percent? It's a little bit tough to do because it's 351. It's not really easy to turn that into 100, right? Earlier, we had like, let's say you had 25 people in total, you can multiply that by 4. Or if you had like, let's say for example, you had like 2 people in a group of 25 that are sick, you can multiply this by 4, and you can multiply this by 4, and you say, okay, if a group of 25 has 2 people that are sick, then a group of 100 would have 8 people that are sick. That would be easy. But 351 is hard to turn into 100. But there is a way, and it's a little silly, but I'll show you. And you don't need to think about all of this logic every single time you do a percent. This is just the back end of things, right? The back of your head. You should maybe keep this in mind. I'll show you a simpler way of doing it in a bit. But anyways, back to this question. So you have 351 people in this group, and 5 of them are sick. Okay, so 5 of them are sick. That's no good. And you want to find out what is percent. What you can do is you can actually divide this whole thing by 351. So you have 351 groups. Okay, 351 little groups. Let's zoom in on one of these groups. In this group, you're gonna have, well, actually, let's go back 1 second. So you had 351 people in total in this group, and 5 were sick, right? So that means that you had 346 people that were healthy and 5 that are sick, because in total that adds up to 351. Okay, so 346 people that are healthy divided by 351, that's not quite a full person, but so let's say he's missing his knees or just missing maybe the bottom of his feet, something like that. It's not quite a full person. And the 5 people that are divided by 351, it's just going to be a tiny sliver, right? 5 sick people divided by 351, you just get a tiny sliver. So let me just show you what we did here. So we have 351 groups. I'm going to put ... 351 groups, and each one of these little groups has almost a full healthy person and a tiny sliver of a sick person. Okay, so what we did was we said 5 divided by 351. We divide the top and the bottom by 351, and what we get is Well, we get this tiny sliver over 1, right? This tiny sliver over 1. So what that means is that each one of these groups contains a full person. So it's almost a full healthy person and a tiny sliver of a sick person. Okay? So we have this tiny sliver and the group has 1. What we can do now is we can say, okay, we're going to multiply this by 100. So this contains 1 person in total. And if we multiply that by 100, then what we get is a big group that has 100 people in total, right? And it has 100 of these little slivers. Now, let's actually do the math and find out exactly how much sick people we'd have here. So what we do is we go back and we say, okay, 5 divided by 351. So 5 divided by 351 equals a sliver, and the sliver is 5 divided by 351. That's 0. Let me erase this. 0.0142. Okay, with some trailing decimals, but it's okay. We can just use 3 numbers. It's fine. Okay, so we had 0.0142, and we have to multiply that by 100, and what that equals is 1.42. 1.42. Okay, so in this group of 100 people that we have 1.42 sick people. Okay, so per 100 people, we have 1.42 sick people. Or in other words, 1.42% of people are sick per percent, right? Per 100. Per 100, there's 1.42. Okay? You might be wondering, what about all these other groups? What should we do with them? That's a good question. Just remember that this is all kind of a mathematical trick. So this is kind of like try to remember what we had before. So we had, like, let's say we had 5 people who are sick per 25, and then we can say, okay, that's times, we can multiply the top and bottom by 4, and then we get 20 over 100. So 20 out of 100 people are sick, right? This ratio of 5 to 25 stays the same, even though now we have 20 over 100, right? The ratio remains the same. So all you're doing is taking this ratio and blowing it up so that you can see what would happen if there was 100 people there, right? So 25 people, there was 5 people that were sick. When you blow up this ratio to have 100 people in total, then we have 20 people that are sick. Now, in the same way here, we had 351 people in total. 5 of them were sick. When we divide by 351, we keep the same ratio. The ratio doesn't change. So 5 over 351 is the same ratio as 0.0142 over 1. Okay? It's the same ratio. And then we blow up this ratio so that we can see how many we would have over 100 people, right? So the ratio just got shrunk into a convenient number that we can multiply into 100. And then we just multiply that ratio into 100 people. And that's how you figure out if you had 100 people, how many people would be sick. Okay? So if you want to find out the percentage of something, it's really straightforward. Let's say, for example, that you have $675,000. Let me write that a little bit nicer. 675,000. So 675. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And you want to find out what percentage of that is 217,000. So 217,000. So let's say, for example, you have $675,000 and you want to give away 217. What percentage of your wealth have you given away? Well, it's percent, right? So per $100. So for every dollar you have, how many dollars are you giving away? Maybe this one's a little bit harder. Let's maybe do an easier example first before we tackle this one. So over on the side, let's say that you had $5 in total and you gave away one, right? Okay, so $5 in total, you gave away one. What percentage of your wealth did you give away? Well, it's per $100, how many dollars did you give away? So let me write that down. Per $100, how many dollars did you give? Let's just say give. Okay. So if you have 1 over 5, so you had $5, you gave $1 away. Well, per 5, you gave away 1, right? But we want to look for per 100. So what we might do is we want to turn this into a per 100. So we multiply the top and bottom by some number that turns 5 into 100. We could try maybe 10 at first. Okay. So 1 times 10, that's going to equal 10. And then 5 times 10, that's going to equal 50. Okay, so that's per 50, but we want to find it per 100, right? So let's keep going. So let's multiply the top and bottom by 2, because that'll turn 50 into 100. So that'll be 20, so 10 times 2 is 20, 50 times 2, that's 100. Okay, so per $100, you gave away 20. So that means per $100, you gave away 20. Or you could say you gave away 20% of your wealth. 20. So for every $100 you had, if you had $100, you would give away 20 if you gave somebody money at this ratio. Okay, it's kind of confusing, but that's how it is. So you gotta kind of deal with that confusion and figure out how it makes sense for you. Okay, so in this case over here, we have 217 and let's get rid of that. $217, $217,000 given away when originally you had 675,000. So in this case, what we'd want to do is, because this is kind of hard to convert, like this is hard to turn into 100, what we can do is we can just divide everything by 675,000. And the reason why we might do this is because 675,000 divided by 675,000, well, that's just 1, right? 217,000 divided by 657. Let's figure out what that might be. Just gonna grab my calculator. So 217,000 divided by 675,000. That's 0.3214 da 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 da. Okay. Okay, so for every dollar you give away 0.32 of a dollar, so 32 cents. But you want to find out percentage wise how much, or per $100, how much you give away. Okay, so to do that, we just multiply the top and bottom by 100. And then what we end up getting is per $100, you gave away $32.14. So, yeah, one way to think about this is, imagine that you had your $675,000 all in a vault, and all the money was divided into 100s, right? Like this. So here's your vault, and all your money is just divided into little baggies of 100. Okay? If that was the case, and somebody wanted $217,000 from you, what you could do is you could take $32.14 out of each baggie. Like this. Okay? So there would be more baggies than this, but I can't draw that many baggies, right? But out of however many baggies you would have, each one of them you would have given $32.14. Okay? So that's a little bit more of an interesting way to think about how much money you gave away, because if you give away 90% of your money, right, then you don't really have much money left in each one of these baggies. It'd be something like this. It's kind of like almost like a fuel gauge, where each one of the gauges tells you exactly the same thing. So you really only need to look at one fuel gauge to see how much of your original money you had left.